Special Inquisitor Ryan? More like Special Ryan, because I sold my physical copy of Octopath Traveler before I even thought about making this video. Ugh. So yes, I actually sold Octopath Traveler for the price of Zen Bamboo luxury bedsheets because God knows who needs those. I need it. Now, you may be wondering, Ryan, how did you make this video without a copy of the game? Well, I wrote a review in Metacritic a while back about the game. The thing is, I had to intentionally shorten that review in order to fit the website's character limit. This video is essentially the definitive version of that. Released in July of 2018, Octopath Traveler is the definitive example of the tried and true JRPG genre. It provides a thrilling, yet beautiful storytelling experience to both veterans of said genre and new players willing to immerse themselves in the continent of Ostera that seamlessly builds itself up no matter where you are. The game divides the compelling journey of 8 protagonists, Ophelia, Cyrus, Tressa, Alberic, Primrose, Alfin, Therion and Harnett, into 4 chapters with a total of 32. Each of them has their own ambitions and goals they will eventually meet, allowing the player to experience all of them individually and at their own pace. But man, that title screen. To me, it brings back great memories, and to the gaming industry, it is a memory, a refined memory, of the games that the generation before me played with the SNES or Sega Genesis. It starts off with some strings and a black background with the logo plastered onto it. Nothing much, but that's exactly the point. It sets up your expectations for what's about to come. Then, the flute kicks in, and the gorgeous melody of the title theme blooms from relative silence. The black background fades into a montage of the travelers departing on their journeys, starting with Ophelia. They're not in a random location on the map, rather, they're at the beginning of their journeys, and so are you on a journey of your own. The game transports you to the world map of Ostera, and you're asked to choose a traveller to begin your journey. The characters are spread across the map, and you instantly get a feel for how expansive the world is. There's light shining on the sprite of the character you select. How's that for uplifting? I mean, the sprites are literally being lifted by a stand. Regardless of the one you choose first, each story will start at a relatively simple beginning, which cements the basic premise of the plot with a cutscene. The bios on your chosen character already set the narrative in stone, but this is the first time you're seeing that story unfold. This laid-back, peaceful start, marking the beginning of each adventure, is reminiscent of classic RPGs that began on a peaceful note. So why does every single one of them have to start in a town? The story eventually transitions into a more heated, adrenaline-fueled narrative once a player is engaged in their individual stories, which brings up the topic of pacing. Is it good? Yes. Could it be better? Also yes. Let's compare Alfin's and Alberic's story. I like Alberic's story in particular because of how well it flows. Alfin is an apothecary here. You wouldn't expect much in the world of JRPGs where gods, eldritch demons, and humans coexist. It takes about 3 chapters before Alfin encounters his main dilemma, which I'll get onto in a bit. For Alberic, you already know the types of problems he faces at the beginning, his past. He can't erase his failures to prevent the fall of his king and kingdom. Like any good redemption story, he has to confront it. The story lifts off swiftly and gets increasingly better with each chapter. There are new revelations, higher stakes, and a stronger sense of motivation for Alberic to pursue his enemy, the masterminds behind the fall of Hornburg. With Alfin, his enemy is himself. The guy heals a badly injured man, who turns out to be a sociopath kidnapping children, and he's forced to kill him to save said child. This leaves him in an existential crisis, doubting the very reason he lives, which is to save the lives of others, just as he was saved. Interesting storyline, huh? Now here's the bad part. He doesn't fully realize that until the latter half of his story, As someone who chose Alfin to begin my journey, it took quite a while for his story to get somewhere. Most stories build up the narrative throughout each chapter, but I feel as though the chapter 3 boss for Alfin dropped the truth on you harder than I dropped philosophy for GCSEs. Obviously, the stories are on a shorter scale than usual because, dear lord, if there were 8 of them that each had the length of Chrono Trigger, my social life would go bye-bye. Luckily for you, that's not the case, even though you probably destroyed your social life at some point. The game allows you to experience each of their stories at your own leisure. You're free to pick and choose which character you want to accompany next, and you're not obligated to finish the chapter you're on once it's started. As such, it gives you an incentive to explore everything the town and the area around it has to offer, mostly because you're not pressured into doing something more important and abandoning the places you want to visit, or the people you'd like to talk to. Don't worry completionists, that boss can wait in a cave for the next few months trying to kill you. I'm a guy that loves to take his sweet time on virtually anything, and the game is generous with giving you that time. What the game isn't generous with is the interaction between the characters you play. Oh? You want romance in a Square Enix game? Sorry shippers, this ain't it, chief. Even the box art screams, oh, they are travelling together. The game doesn't execute that concept enough to create more immersion from the player. Sure, there are conversations that occur between the travellers in the tavern, but even that is circumstantial. I would have loved to have Cyrus give his 2 cents on the villain's motives, or Therian ignite an argument with Tressa over her obsession for valuables as she tracks down missing treasure. Possibly in the overworld, they could have meaningless conversations to break the ambience, taking notes from Xenoblade Chronicles and Final Fantasy XV, or maybe Ophelia talking about why she feels the need to go through a bus rush to find a late-fall barracks enemy, with the whole "violence doesn't solve anything" idea. Little details like these would make the characters share a strong connection with each other. Good chemistry is usually one of the highlights of a standard JRPG. You'd want to go through their story of course, but the journey becomes more refreshing when it's experienced by not only you, but the people you play as. What is arguably one of the, if not the most important aspect of any given JRPG, is the story that accompanies them. It's advertised as its main selling point after all. The stories themselves aren't bad, they're just not memorable enough. I can recall the rudimentary plot for Primrose and Alfin, one who seeks revenge for her father, and the other travelling the world to heal people. The rest is rather vague to me, and I can't exactly pick out the key details without doing a little browsing to clarify myself. Comparing it to something like Persona 5, which puts a huge emphasis on its narrative, would be a sin against humanity. Instead of one big story like Tolkien's The Hobbit, it's an anthology of short stories, like Neil Gaiman's Fragile Things. Pretend that I have it. The 8 paths that you can walk upon are all parallel to each other. As such, there isn't an overarching plot tying your travellers together in any way. However, there are heaps of informative text forming a connection between the stories. The catch is, it's only accessible at the very end of the game, after you've completed every character's journey, gone through an elaborate side quest, and braved a brutal boss rush after grinding your characters. This method of lore is a double-edged sword. Players would have to endure the disappointment of not seeing the travellers interact in a significant way, but that wait pays off in the end with a spectacular post-game finale. Playing through the stories themselves also feels formulaic the more you invest in the game. It's routine, albeit a fun and interesting one, but a routine nonetheless. You visit a given town, activate the character's respective field skills, and engage their bosses. After that, the cycle repeats itself. This can tend to get progressively off-putting for completionists like me, but I saw it as a means of further world building. Every town you come across has a cultural significance in the world of Ostera, with how it has been impacted by the events the characters go through. This is what makes their journeys feel all the more personal. Some other towns even have little rewarding secrets sprinkled in for those wanting to make the most out of the game by challenging the use of the field skills. The depth of the stories is scaled down to fit the 4-chapter quota. It's nothing too captivating, but there's enough emotional weight to them which makes it worth a playthrough. I think the core theme running through these stories is acceptance, and it's an eloquent message told in many ways. Accepting that your father is gone and you've done all that you can to avenge him, accepting yourself and not who you could be, accepting the past and not allowing it to define you as a person. Their struggles and their resolve to overcome it speaks volumes in terms of reflection. The game's visual style represents the past, of course, but the elements that make it a great game are evidence of the gaming industry moving forward. Orchestra, 3D backgrounds, stunning visual effects, voice acting. All of these weren't present in an RPG during the 90s. We've developed the industry into the super boss that it is because we strive to improve in making better entertainment. Being swallowed by the past limits what we can do, and so we march onwards. Like how Alberic let go of his failures to pursue a happier life protecting those worth fighting for, we should let go of the things holding us back from doing what makes life worth living. The tales of the Travelers are compact, but it succeeds in weaving a striking message of acceptance in its short length. A message which I'm sure many of us can resonate with. Any and every JRPG is not complete without a unique battle system, and Octopath Traveler embodies that trait well. It manages to toss in nostalgia and innovation into a cauldron of sorts. The potion, brewed from that process, contains stylish gameplay that sources elements from its spiritual predecessor, the Bravely Default series. You've got the fundamental commands of a Square Enix RPG: attack, defend, flee, and items. The game takes a unique spin on the battle system by utilizing a mechanic known as boost points, or BP. This can speed up the progress of your fight and turn the tides in your favour. Unlike the Bravely games, using it doesn't really put your characters in a bad spot if you don't play your cards right. It just means you're placed in an advantage state for a short time period, and then you're back to tanking blows or dishing them out, albeit not as strong. Up to 5 BP can be stored per character, but only 4 can be used up at one time. The points can be accumulated every turn unless the enemy casts a spell that temporarily prevents you from gaining them. This mechanic is crucial in determining the flow of the fight. At the beginning, it's a common habit to use up the boost points as quickly as possible to end the fight, because patience in the world of gaming is apparently a non-existent word. As you progress through the game and get a better grasp of the combat system, you start to realize that without these glowing dots, you'd be livestock for the enemies. It becomes less of a speed up button and more of a means to strategize your way through a battle. Basic brawn against stronger enemies isn't ideal at that stage in the game, which is where the brain comes into effect, no matter how small. I can't go too much into the ins and outs of the battle system. It has a depth which I can't describe on paper. Using a boost point immediately after you earn one doesn't make much of a difference as opposed to saving it up for the big coup de grace. You're better off exposing the weaknesses of your opponents with a weapon or spell until you've enough BP to land some damaging hits. But as the saying goes, to each their own. Octopath Traveler gives players the liberty to devise a strategy based on their playstyle. Think of it as a lock and key. You're provided with the key, that being the tools at your disposal to fit in the lock, which is the solution to a battle and ultimately will grant you victory. The lock itself shapeshifts, and hence you have to think of your own way to resolve the problem. Now I know the same could be said for most of the RPGs out there, if not all of them, but this extra layer of strategy makes the game's battle system stand out from the rest of them. The combat itself is a breathtaking sight to conceive. It's like watching a fireworks show and being completely entranced by it. Small sprites of your characters perform devastating attacks with the use of CGI and particle effects. Their relative lack of movement contrasts the spectacle of the blows you deal, and it's a great contrast if you ask me. It emphasizes the severity of your attacks or spells, giving weight and motion to what is otherwise a few frames of sprite animation. The thrill of the fight, as Alberic puts it, is where the battle system shines. Each protagonist bears skills unique to them, with the exception of secondary jobs. These are flexible means of battling, and can be used as a mold for your preferred way of tackling a fight. Would you favour defense, by having a cleric like Ophelia and a fast attacker draining SP such as Therion for the party? Or would you lean towards offense, and have characters such as Alberic and Cyrus dealing as much damage as they can before they are eliminated? The choice is yours, and yours alone to make. I think it's a bigger crime than Alvin's hair that Octopath Traveler's music didn't win Best Score in 2018. Music is a very overlooked aspect of a video game, but to those that acknowledge it, it's an integral factor to what makes a game memorable. It's fair to say the game lets you experience the journeys, the one you see, and the one you hear. Each music track portrays a particular atmosphere which blends in perfectly with how tense or light-hearted a scene is. You can feel the emotional weight of their stories being placed on you, not only visually, but through the use of orchestra breaking the silence. Players get a heightened sense of what the characters go through, with the music as an auditory stimulant. If anything, the shifting atmosphere hinges on the music, and its consistent quality increases the immersion, the way it encapsulates you. You can't deny that it's beautiful. I couldn't. This very piece of music that you're hearing spoke to me on an emotional level. My party stood still in the depths of an ambient forest, whilst I shed tears reminiscing the things I've been through, both good and bad. Hearing it for the first time, without any knowledge of the soundtrack prior, was an enthralling moment. And believe it or not, that's only just one track. If I listed my experiences fully with the music, I might as well write the 34th Amendment. In fact, I already have. It states, Octopath Traveler reserves the full and undisclosed right to enter and remain in the Hall of Fame for its contributions in music. How's that? There's an elevating level of progression that's present as you go through the game with the intensity of the music. The music that plays for the initial boss battles, Decisive Battle 1, doesn't sound like there's much at stake, though you acknowledge that the enemy is a threat that you have to dispatch of. Decisive Battle 2, however, begins at the crescendo of the track, with the violins and drums setting the stage. You're instantly thrust into a much larger peril as the tension is reinforced. The difference between the first and second boss battle themes is like falling into a well and falling into the Grand Canyon. You can tell there's a disparity in how severe a situation is for the characters, both through the dialogue and of course, the music. In all honesty, I can't go too in depth about the music. You'd have to listen to them yourself to form an opinion, as I have my own. If you'd like to know more about the impact of the music on its players, there's an excellent video discussing the effect of the transitions with the boss battles from GameScore Fanfare. It's a great watch from start to finish, and I highly recommend viewing it should you have an appreciation for the game's music. In conclusion, Octopath Traveler is certainly a remarkable experience for both new players and veterans of the undying JRPG genre, only held back from perfection by its storytelling flaws. It strikes a unique harmony between past and present with its distinct visual style. The game blends 2D sprites with 3D assets, making it feel like the expansive world of Astera is contained in a charming diorama. What makes the game feel even more progressive beyond the development of the narrative and the tone is the beautiful soundtrack, greatly establishing the atmosphere for a given scene. Its battle system is engaging and encourages your own solutions to a fight with the BP mechanic, which adds a much needed layer of strategy, a must-have for any Switch owner. Basically, this game is a glorified D&D.